brothers and sisters, with the angels and archangels and all of the galactic realm and the higher councils. I mean, we have access, and that, again, that was part of it. But those that are going to experience it and those that are experiencing it are those that, I'm going to say, have worked for it, really worked for it, and walked the hard road, you know, the roads less traveled, and surrendered a whole lot, and kind of studied the way of the mystics and those they call the saints and sages of times gone by. And now, truthfully, it's payday, if you will. You know, it's like grace is really is really coming down to walk with us in many ways, and really and simplistically, the bottom line of all of that is love and compassion for self and for each other. And coupled with that is the absolute astuteness now of being in absolute integrity, alignment, and rapport and resonance. I've said it before. I say it all the time, and I teach it all the time, because there is a recipe to this transformation in consciousness, and we do need to follow it. And it's not haphazard, and it is kind of like baking a souffle. You've got to do it the right way in order for it to become all that it was intended to be, and to rise up light and fluffy and taste delicious and be delicious.
Interesting. So some people who are on the wayshower side of things have said in the past that all of humanity has chosen to awaken. And some people, I know this is a mental question, but are people here, are we all going to be able to see this reflected in the world around us eventually, that there will be peace and health and harmony and love and so on and so forth? Or are some people choosing simply not to awaken at this time? Or options C, D, E, F.
There are options.
Yeah.
And there are different layers of the awakening. And part of this third dimensional human experience was for there to be polarity and duality. And so different people had to don different acting garb, if you will, play their part to anchor in this illusion, if you will. That's an oxymoron, isn't it? But really, there will be different stages of awakening for sure, and we see that right now. And I think more importantly is that, you know, anybody that's listening, everybody that's listening, is that we decide if we're going to wake up or not. We decide if we are going to be all that we can be. We decide if we're going to learn the way of higher consciousness, or as my friend Jim says, being conscious of being conscious. We get to choose it. And in the choosing of it, it has to be backed by loving action, or it's irrelevant. You know, the third dimensional mind has this tendency to trick us into believing something is done before it is, by saying, I will, I can, and I am, except not the truth of I am. And so we have these mental things that go on in our mortal mind that sometimes has us believing we've already done something that we haven't.
Yeah.
So this is where real integrity comes in to play, and in recognizing is what I say, think, smell, breathe, and act in absolute alignment with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Are my actions in alignment with my thoughts? Are my feelings in alignment? And that's what I have found to be the real key note for raising consciousness. And you have to be impeccable.
Yeah.
You know, and I'll give you another example. Last week, a friend of mine and I had planned to go to a book signing and workshop of an author that was in town. And we had planned it for a couple of weeks out. The evening before was the equinox, actually, and we had been in a 4-hour meditation and working with the energies and helping to anchor them in here. And the next day we both realized that we were tired. And one didn't say to the other, however, initially, you know what, I'm really tired and I really don't feel like going to this. Meaning, I'm really not in alignment with doing that today. So I noticed it, and interestingly, she noticed it. So she called me up and she said, so how do you feel? And I said, well, I'm tired today. And truthfully, I don't really want to go to this today. And it was raining, and it was a Sunday. And she said, you know, I don't either. And I said, okay, here's a perfect way to use alignment, even in the most simplistic way. Are we in alignment with going today? No. Okay, then we're not going to go.
Right.
And I called the author the next morning, because knowing her, and I told her why we didn't show up. And I think that's a part of our responsibility when our alignment shifts. If there's others involved, that we explain that. And we can't be attached to the outcome. It'll be what it'll be. But we, in integrity and love, explain it. And this person understood it and said, no problem, I get it. So every moment we really have an opportunity to really see if we are in alignment with whatever it is, with our jobs, with our friends, with our plans, with anything. We just have to be in alignment. And the more we get used to operating in a more really simplistic and honest way, we will find ourselves raising our consciousness, being in much greater rapport with the higher dimensions, and having very different experiences with ourselves and with others. So you can use that alignment and rapport and resonance with anything and everything in your day.
Well, that's a really, I think you're hitting on really the keys that I find for myself when I'm not in alignment with something and I go ahead with it. It's kind of like watching a horror movie where the little girl's got her hand on the doorknob and the boogeyman or the monster's back there and you're going to chop her head off, and the whole audience knows that she shouldn't be doing that. And that's kind of that inner voice that tells us, the intuitive aspect, or empathic or psychic or whatever you want to call it, whatever labels make you happy, tells us, usually I get it through my body. I get an uncomfortable feeling in my solar plexus. And then I have to ask myself, well, what's going on? What is it that I'm feeling about this experience? And often when I look at that, there's something that is not in alignment or something that I feel might bring consequences if I proceed in that direction. And usually I get to test that out really simply by, sometimes it's as simple as, just driving here and driving there, and I choose to not listen, and by doing that, something happens that's not quite so pleasant. But fortunately, those are little lessons, and I take them as big ones, because then I think that you can spare yourself some of these larger bricks on the head that some of us have had to have for quite a few years.
And we don't need them anymore. And,
no, absolutely
and
not.
And it really, enough is enough. We've mastered the art of lower consciousness. We've mastered the art of being out of integrity and out of alignment and out of balance. We've mastered it, and we said we would. We said we would. That's part of the human experience.
Yeah.
But now, enough is enough. Now we don't have to suffer anymore. Now we don't have to just survive anymore. Now it's not okay to not pay attention because the consequences are greater. What the greater consequence really is that we become more miserable with ourselves.
Yes.
We become more it's like we can't find a way in to love ourselves. We can't find a way in to balance the divine feminine and the masculine aspects of ourselves. We can't find the way to hook up and sync up with the higher energies and the higher dimensions. And so it's much more, it impedes much more on us now. And I think that's why more and more people are starting to say, you know what, enough already. I'm not doing that. Even if one is afraid because they don't have the experience to do something different, they don't have that go-by for it yet. It's about creating a go-by. It's about creating that so that you turn the momentum around. You shift it, and if you make choices that are on behalf of yourself and in alignment with higher truth, pretty soon it's going to be just, you're going to make that choice just because you wouldn't make any other choice anymore. Right. And you'll begin to relax into yourself and begin to have a much more divine experience with yourself.
Oh, yeah. And then you reach a point, too, where you can't be out of integrity with anyone else because you're in integrity with yourself. And when you are out of integrity, I can't manipulate or lie or delude or pretend or, you know, for the most part. I mean, I'm sure there's some things I haven't seen about myself yet, but for the most part, those kinds of behaviors are just not even in my thought processes at all.
And you know what, Lance? Even if we do notice, because we're still having this human experience. Right. Even when we do that, we can stop ourselves midway, or even if we've actually done it, but not with a harsh criticism about ourselves. Oh, you're so stupid. Oh, you did it again. Oh my God. You know, you're an idiot. It's more of just noticing and going, okay, you know what? I was just out of integrity. I was just out of alignment. I'm not going to do that again. I noticed it. I bless it. I get the blessing from it. I let it go. Yes. And I will choose differently the next time. And it's not about beating yourself up. It's just about noticing, being loving and compassionate, and letting it go.
Wonderful.
And it works.
Yes. Also, you mentioned this kind of, but doesn't moving into your own higher consciousness or your own higher self, doesn't that require detaching almost completely from this 3D existence of the illusion? Meaning, you know, televisions and newspapers and the world as we see it presented to us by the media.
Well, it's, you know, I do call it unplugging, and I do this technique with people where I actually take them through parts and places of themselves that are still literally plugged into the third dimension, and we do this process of really pulling the plug out and shape-shifting the belief system and then actually plugging it into the fourth dimensional crystalline grid. And to further answer your question, what I notice is, you know, we don't have to be compelled to the dramas that are playing out in the world external. Doesn't mean that we're not aware of them. We just don't plug into them because we realize they are of a lower nature, even at times a lower mystical nature, if you will, because there are lower mystical things that are going on as